Sometimes I think God must chuckle at how tightly we hold on to doors He's already shut. We stand there jiggling the handle, banging on the frame, praying for it to swing wide again, when the truth is that chapter has already served its purpose. I remember seasons in my own life when I was crying over what I thought was a loss, but heaven was actually rearranging my direction. C, God's no is never careless. His shut doors aren't rejection, they're redirection. They're divine detours towards something richer, deeper, and far more aligned with who He created us to be. And here's the good news. While we may fixate on what ended, God is already preparing what's ahead. He isn't in the business of leaving His children stranded in the hallway. He's in the business of opening pathways that lead us into freedom, into calling, into a purpose bigger than we could have orchestrated. So if today you feel like you're staring at a locked door, hear me when I say, don't despair. Because when God shuts one door, He's clearing the path for you to step into the one He's been holding open all along. There are seasons in life when a door slams shut and it rattles our hearts so deeply that we can't help but feel abandoned or punished. We replay the moments, we question our prayers, and we wonder if maybe we did something wrong to deserve this sudden ending. But what if that closed door isn't a sign of God's disappointment, but rather an act of His deep love? Sometimes His greatest mercy shows up not in what He gives us, but in what He withholds. A closed door, though it may sting, is often heaven's shield around us, a quiet whisper of protection that only later we come to understand. Think about it. God sees the road ahead in ways we cannot. He knows the relationships that would have drained us, the jobs that would have broken us, the opportunities that looked shiny but were laced with compromise. From our limited view, it all seemed perfect, maybe even like an answered prayer. Yet from His eternal perspective, He could see the cracks we couldn't. That's why He didn't just gently close the door. Sometimes He bolted it shut, not to leave us stranded, but to guard our hearts, our minds, and our destiny from harm we didn't even realize was waiting on the other side. I've lived long enough to realize that hindsight is often the best teacher of God's faithfulness. There were seasons when I was heartbroken over what didn't work out, only to discover years later that the very thing I thought I wanted would have led me down a road of unnecessary pain. And in those moments, I could almost hear the Lord whisper, "See, I wasn't punishing you. I was protecting you." His no doesn't diminish us. It delivers us. His closed doors are proof that He values us too much to let us settle for less than His best. When God closes a door, He's not rejecting you. He's redirecting you. That's a hard truth to swallow in the moment because our hearts crave clarity and control. We want to see the blueprint. We want every why answered. But part of faith is trusting that His vision is clearer than ours. His timing is wiser than ours. His plans are greater than the small version of life we're trying to build. So instead of standing at the closed door, pounding our fists and begging it to reopen, we learn to turn around and look for the pathway He's quietly revealing in the hallway. And here's the beauty. Every closed door is an invitation to deeper intimacy with God. It's in those moments of confusion and disappointment that we lean harder into His presence. We discover that His companionship is more sustaining than any opportunity we thought we lost. We find peace in His voice and comfort in His guidance. And as our faith matures, we begin to recognize that what He withholds is just as important as what He gives. So the next time you're staring at a closed door, don't let despair consume you. Instead, let hope rise in your heart. Remind yourself that God's hands are too kind to ever hurt you and too wise to ever make a mistake. That door isn't evidence of punishment. It's a reminder of protection. And protection means preservation. It means you are being safeguarded for something greater, for something more fitting, for something aligned with the very purpose He placed inside you before the foundation of the world. You can trust this. God's closed doors always lead to better pathways. And one day you'll look back and realize that the very thing you thought was breaking you was, in fact, saving you. It wasn't rejection at all. It was divine protection setting you up to walk boldly into your true purpose. We don't usually like the word no. It feels heavy, disappointing, and final. When doors close and prayers seem unanswered, our hearts can slip into discouragement. We wonder if God even heard us, or if we somehow missed His will. Yet so often, what we call an unanswered prayer is actually God's way of answering us with something far greater than we asked for. His no is rarely the end of the story. It's the turning point toward a better yes that we couldn't yet imagine. God sees the full tapestry of our lives while we only see the single thread in front of us. From our perspective, we think we know what we need to be fulfilled or to move forward. We map out our plans, polish our dreams, and bring them before Him with expectation. But sometimes His love for us is too deep to simply hand over what we think we want. Sometimes He looks at our request and, with the tenderness of a father who knows what's around the corner, He says, "Not that way, not this time." That denial isn't meant to crush us. It's meant to redirect us towards something bigger, richer, and more in line with our true calling. The Bible is filled with moments where God's no became the seed of a far greater yes. Think of the Apostle Paul, who pleaded for God to remove his thorn in the flesh. The answer he received wasn't what he expected. God said no. But in that no came the overwhelming yes of divine strength. My grace is sufficient for you, God told him. And Paul learned that weakness was the very stage where God's power shone brightest. The closed door of relief opened into the wide hallway of grace, not just for Paul, but for every believer who now draws courage from his words. In our own lives, we can look back and see it too. That job you didn't get, the relationship that ended, the opportunity that slipped away. At the time, it felt like heartbreak, but later it proved to be a setup for something better. Maybe you were saved from a destructive path or positioned for a blessing you never saw coming. God's no in one season often creates space for His yes in another. And His yes is never halfway. It's abundant, overflowing, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. What makes this truth so difficult is that the greater yes doesn't usually appear immediately. There's often a waiting room between heaven's no and the revelation of what God is preparing. That waiting can feel like silence or even punishment. But it's neither. It's the season of molding, shaping, and equipping. God isn't just preparing the blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. His delays are not denials. They are divine pauses that ensure when the yes comes, you're ready to steward it well. This means we don't have to fear rejection from God. His no isn't rejection at all. It's redirection. He isn't shutting us down. He's setting us up. His no closes off the smaller things so that our arms are free to receive the greater things. And the greater things are always worth the wait. So when you're in that season of closed doors and unanswered prayers, remember this: heaven's no is not the finale. It's the prologue to a bigger story. One day, perhaps years later, you'll look back and say, "Thank you, Lord, for not giving me what I thought I wanted. Thank you for protecting me from my small vision so I could step into your greater purpose." And no, from heaven is not the end. It is the doorway to God's greater, wise. And his yes will always exceed what you dared to hope, dream, or imagine. Loss has a way of shaking us to the core. It leaves us with empty hands, unanswered questions, and a heart that aches with disappointment. When something we loved, pursued, or depended on slips away, our natural instinct is to grieve what's gone and to label it as failure or rejection. But what if what feels like loss isn't the end at all? What if it is God's way of gently turning us away from a lesser plan so he can guide us toward the life he always intended? Sometimes the very thing that breaks our heart is the same thing that clears the path for divine redirection. We often hold tightly to our own blueprints for life. We picture how our career should unfold, who we should walk beside, where we should live, and how success should look. But the truth is, our vision is limited. We can't see what's around the corner, and we can't always discern the long-term cost of what we think we want. God, however, sees it all. He knows the roads that would lead to dead ends, the relationships that would drain our souls, and the opportunities that would stunt our growth. So in his kindness, he allows certain doors to close and certain things to be removed, not to diminish us, but to redirect us. Think of Joseph in the book of Genesis. He experienced deep loss, torn from his family, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and later thrown into prison for a crime he didn't commit. By every measure, it looked like his life was unraveling, yet each loss was actually leading him closer to his divine assignment. Had Joseph not been redirected through pain and disappointment, he never would have stepped into the palace to save an entire nation from famine. What looked like loss was God's hand of redirection guiding him toward purpose. The same is true for us. The relationship that ended may have broken your heart, but it also freed you from a future that wasn't meant for you. The job you didn't get may have bruised your ego, but it positioned you to discover the career you were born to do. The season you thought was wasted may have felt like loss, but it was God's classroom where he was shaping your character for what was coming next. Loss feels final, but in God's hands, it is often the doorway to something far more lasting. One of the most beautiful truths about our faith is that God never wastes our pain. Every tear, every disappointment, every ending can become raw material for his redemptive work. Loss becomes the soil where new vision grows. Disappointment becomes the compass pointing us in a new direction. What we thought was subtraction is often divine multiplication. God pruning what no longer serves us so he can cultivate what will bear fruit in our future. But let's be honest, in the moment, it rarely feels like redirection. It feels like heart-touch. That's why trust is so essential. Faith is the ability to believe that even when life feels like it's falling apart, God is still holding the pieces. It's choosing to believe that he is too wise to make mistakes and too loving to abandon us. It's trusting that the hand that allowed something to be taken away is the same hand that is guiding us towards something better. So if you are walking through loss right now, don't see it as the conclusion of your story. See it as a chapter transition. You may feel like something precious has been taken, but heaven may be shifting you into position for something greater. What feels like loss today may be revealed tomorrow as divine redirection. And when you stand in the place God has been leading you to all along, you'll look back and realize that what you thought was the breaking of your dreams was actually the making of your destiny. When a door closes in our lives, it can feel like the world has ended. The job we counted on, the relationship we dreamed about, the opportunity we prayed for, it slips away. And suddenly we're left standing in the hallway of uncertainty, wondering what went wrong. But here's the truth. We often forget, in that painful pause, God never shuts a door without already preparing a better pathway ahead. He isn't careless with our journeys. His plans aren't random. When he closes one chapter, it is because he has already written the next one with greater care, greater wisdom, and greater purpose than we could have imagined. We tend to interpret closed doors as rejection. But in God's economy, a closed door is often a redirection towards something bigger. It may not make sense in the moment because all we can see is what we lost. But God is always working beyond the visible. He is weaving together opportunities, aligning people, and orchestrating circumstances in ways that are hidden to us, but crystal clear to him. That's why his closed doors are never cruel. They are strategic. They are evidence that he is already preparing the ground for what's next. Think of the Israelites when they left Egypt. To them, the wilderness may have felt like a locked door to the promised land. They were wandering, hungry, and uncertain. But even in that wilderness, God was preparing them for the better pathway ahead. He was teaching them dependence on him, shaping their character, and leading them step by step toward a land flowing with milk and honey. What looked like delay was actually preparation. God hadn't abandoned them. He was guiding them into something greater than they had the capacity to see. The same pattern shows up in our lives. That door that slammed shut might have spared you from years of frustration. The opportunity that slipped away may have saved you from being trapped in a life that wasn't aligned with your true purpose. And while you're wrestling with disappointment, God is quietly arranging the right connections, the right timing, and the right resources so that when the new pathway opens, it won't just meet your expectations, it will exceed them. Preparation is God's way of making sure we don't step into blessings we aren't ready to carry. Sometimes the delay between the closed door and the open pathway is really about equipping us. He strengthens our character, teaches us endurance, and deepens our faith so that when the better pathway is revealed, we can walk it with maturity and grace. What feels like waiting is actually God setting the stage for something extraordinary. This is why trust is essential in seasons of closed doors. Faith doesn't deny the pain of loss, but it anchors us in the conviction that God is still working. It reminds us that his hand is never idle. If he closed the door, it's because he has already prepared another way forward, and not just any way, a better way, a pathway that leads us not only into purpose, but into a deeper relationship with him. So the next time a door closes, resist the temptation to stand there in despair. Instead, lift your eyes and ask God to show you the pathway he is preparing. Believe that his timing is perfect, that his plans are good, and that his heart is always for you. Because when one door closes in God's world, it is never the end of your story. It is the beginning of a better journey. The hallway you're standing in isn't a place of abandonment. It's a place of transition. And on the other side of that transition is the pathway He has been preparing just for you. One day, you'll look back at that closed door and realize it wasn't the end you feared. It was the divine turning point toward the life you were created to live. God never shuts a door without preparing a better pathway ahead. Closed doors have a way of bringing clarity to our lives in ways that open doors never could. When everything is going smoothly, when opportunities seem endless, and when options are wide open, it's easy to get distracted. We chase after things that sparkle but don't satisfy. We invest our time, energy, and heart into pursuits that may look good on the surface, but aren't aligned with our true calling. Yet, when God closes a door, suddenly the noise begins to quiet, and we are forced to refocus. That moment of disappointment or loss becomes the very moment when our calling starts to come into sharper view. A closed door is like a divine highlighter, drawing our attention back to what matters most. It strips away the false layers of identity we've built on success, relationships, or achievements, and it points us back to the deeper truth. We were created for God's purpose, not our own agenda. When one path is shut off, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that God is truly calling me to? What is the assignment He placed on my life that no door, no person, no circumstance can take away? In that wrestling, we discover clarity. The story of Jonah gives us a vivid picture of this. Jonah tried to run through the door of his own plan, heading to Tarshish instead of Nineveh. But God closed that route with a storm and a great fish. It was humiliating, painful, and terrifying, but it was also clarifying. The closed door of escape pushed Jonah back to his true calling, to preach repentance to the people of Nineveh. What Jonah tried to avoid became the very thing that fulfilled his divine purpose. In the same way, God uses closed doors to realign us, to strip away detours, and to press us back into the heart of our calling. It's not easy in the moment. Closed doors can feel like rejection. They can sting with the H of disappointment. But over time, we begin to see that they are actually gifts of direction. They protect us from wasting years on things that would have drained us. And they push us toward what will fulfill us. God doesn't close doors to harm us. He closes them to harness our focus, to sharpen our vision, and to propel us into the very places where we'll find meaning and impact. Closed doors also build resilience. When one way is blocked, we're forced to lean on God for the next step. That dependence creates spiritual strength, the kind of maturity that allows us to walk with boldness into our true purpose. If every door opened easily, we'd never discover the grit, perseverance, and faith required to carry the weight of our calling. The struggle of closed doors prepares us for the stewardship of open ones. So the next time you encounter a door that refuses to open, don't simply see it as an obstacle. See it as an opportunity for clarity. Ask yourself, what is this teaching me about who I am in Christ? How is this shaping me for what I'm called to do? Let that closed door push you to seek God's presence more deeply, to refine your vision more carefully, and to pursue your calling more courageously. Because the truth is, closed doors aren't setbacks. They're setups. They are the holy nudges that keep us from settling for less than our destiny. They push us, sometimes uncomfortably, into the very spaces where our true purpose comes alive. And when we finally walk in that purpose, we realize that every no, every rejection, every closed opportunity was not wasted. It was the compass pointing us toward the life we were created to live.